Set Phasers, a highly illogical Star Trek podcast.
Well, hello, Archie.
Claro que sí, Stevie. How are we?
Claro que sí. Oh, tu español es muy bueno.
Mi español es muy pequeño. Esta es todo de mi español.
Where did that come from?
I don't know. I was
You
feeling
sound
a
like
little claro que sí. I don't know how to say. I was feeling a
Fair
little je ne sais quoi. Yep, there you go. I've exhausted all my Spanish.
Well, feliz viernes a tú, a ti. Oh, see, this is where my Spanish falls down.
Gracias.
Happy Friday to you.
Y tú también.
Perfecto.
Hey, I watched a couple of movies.
Mhm.
All I had to do is take out Mama, right? Okay. Yes, and welcome in everyone listening out there in listening land. You're listening to Set Phasers, a highly illogical, if you couldn't tell, Star Trek podcast. And today's stardate is stardate 324903.6. We're discussing Lower Decks, Star Trek Lower Decks, Season 2, Episode 4, entitled, oh boy, I wrote down so many versions of this. Entitled, let's say,
Mugato Gumato? That's what I thought it was.
Mugato Gumato. Yes.
Okay.
Or, yeah. But there's, I didn't count, like I lost count around 4 or 5, but I think there's like maybe 6 or 7 different pronunciations of Mugato used in this episode.
I did not even pay that close attention.
Yeah. Well,
Oops.
look at me.
Oops.
Top points. I win the House Cup. I'm best boy. So,
Yes, you are.
yes.
Oh dear.
So
Should we run it?
I don't know. Yeah, let's just run it down.
All right.
It's time to run it down. Can you run it down for me? Tell me what just happened. Can you run it down for me? Yes, I'd love to run it down for you. So I'm back to paper notes. So this is old school. I don't have all my fancy stuff. But here we go. It begins with Boimler and Rutherford. They're in the like workout area. I'm sure there's a name for that. Gym? I don't know. Never been.
Mm.
And they walk there like dressed up for a little ambo jitsu with the whole American Gladiator poofy stick giant Q-tip thing. They walk past Mariner and she's like, hey, you guys gonna go do some ambo? And they're like, yeah, maybe meet us in there. And she's like, oh, I'd love to play. And then they secretly exchange they're basically crowing because they've been working on ambo at midnight for the past 3 months to try and beat Mariner. And apparently it's like 20 minutes until Shaxs is going to get there. So they get in there. It's 2-on-1. It's both of them versus Mariner. They score a point on Mariner and make her nose bleed. It's just blood in her mouth. And they're like, oh, sorry. And then she's like, no, this is perfect. Great. I can finally get a real workout in. And then she proceeds to start beating the living crap out of them. Shaxs does show up, but he's like, don't mind me. I'm 10 minutes early. And he just like sits down and reads while they scream in pain. Then there's credits. What's interesting is that this after credits scene is like a little cold open of its own. If this was like a serious Star Trek, this would be the cold open. It would be the two scientists on the planet and they're talking about whatever. This one, they're talking about Ractigino, which of course I love. And in fact, in celebration of that, instead of my customary tea rather, I am drinking coffee. Today, I am a wheat coffee Jenny.
A wheat coffee Jenny.
A wheat coffee Janeway. And they're talking about that, and then they run into a giant Mugato beast, or Gumato, or whatever you want to call it. It's got one big horn. It's like an abominable snowman looking kind of thing with one horn on the top of its head, and they run off screaming. And it turns out that the Mugato are not native to this planet, Frylong IV. So Cerritos is headed there to Frylong IV in order to find out why these Mugato, which are not native to that planet, are there. We get the lowdown from Freeman, Ransom, and Shaxs that apparently these things are poisonous, carnivorous, and they have the strength of 10 men. But Shaxs thinks they can find them. We go down to what I'm going to keep calling 10 forward, even though it's probably a smaller ship and it's probably a different forward, probably like 5 forward or 8 forward. Who
Mhm.
knows? Uh, and Rutherford and Boimler. This is like a Rutherford and Boimler buddy episode, kind of balanced against the Mariner Tendi buddy episode of last week. This is Boys Trip, sort of. They're playing a game called Diplomats. Mariner shows up, and apparently in the game, basically, you win by both of you being unhappy with uh, your extensive negotiations, and that means you've reached compromise. Hooray! But Mariner's like, hey, why don't you guys come to the holodeck
Mhm.
and work out with me? She needs some live ammo. They're like, no. She's like, fine, you guys have this nerdy thing, and I think it suits you. She leaves to go eat by herself, and the bartender fisheyes her. And so when Boimler and Rutherford go over to the bartender, whose name is Honus, and has a distinct, what I would describe as New England accent, sort of
Mhm.
New Hampshire, Maine, almost Boston, not quite. He's like, he calls Mariner a powder keg, and he said it's not a real name. And they're like, why? What's the scuttlebutt? And he's heard a rumor, Honus, this bartender, that Mariner was especially trained for Starfleet Black Ops, and she's friends with them because they're the two softest guys on the ship, and it's the perfect cover. But she's programmed to protect herself at all costs. It's the classic Star Trek sleeper agent thing where the bad baddie is the good or baddie, the middling person is sort of hidden as a wolf in sheep's clothing. Uh, Rutherford and Boimler don't really believe it, but then Boimler gives a bunch of examples, and Rutherford is looking at Mariner, who's like playing with a knife at the table for fun, and they're a little questioning. Meanwhile, Tendy's in sickbay, and apparently she's been working on being more confident, but when her patient has like an alert that goes off, she tries to go over there, but she's like boxed out by this other lieutenant, definitely played by Jess McKenna. Jess McKenna did like 5 voices in this episode. I'm now starting to recognize my favorite
Mhm.
comedians. Uh, and so she's kind of like gives up on that. And then Dr. Tiana calls her into the office and basically says there's a bunch of people on the ship who have not shown up for their like yearly physical. It's just a scan, quick scan, but they haven't shown up. And so she wants Tendi to go out there and find them and scan them however she has to do it. And Tendy's like, great, I'd love to do that. I won't let you down. Meanwhile, Boimler and Rutherford, they're supposed to be reading up on Mugatos, and this is where Boimler points out that Mugatos, there's like several pronunciations for them. There's Mugato, Mugutu, Mugatu, Gumato, and apparently a few others that we'll run into. And he says, isn't that neat and
Run
inconsistent? Ha
into
ha ha.
Mugato.
Yeah.
Sorry, I enjoyed your
No, you got it.
little
Thank
line there.
you. I do my best. Rutherford is distracted because he's reading Mariner's Starfleet record, and they're looking at all the ships she served on. It doesn't add up. She bounces around so much, and apparently one ship she was on, the Atlantis, half the crew disappeared, and the ship was got like the crew had to be put away, and they're like, maybe she killed half of them. They don't know what's up, and then she shows up and says like, "Well, who are you guys talking about?" And they're like, oh, they get scared and throw a tricorder at her, and she catches it. With lightning flash reflexes, lightning flashed,
What's that?
killer Romulan warrior
Ooh,
nuns. I should
Romulan
do my
warrior nun.
exercises before the show. Lightning fast, and that scares them. But they're sort of like starting to be like, oh, maybe Mariner is like Black Ops, Section 31. So there's a storm moving in on Frylong IV. Shaxs is leading the away mission. Basically, they've been told not to. They can't take any weapons because the Mugatos are an endangered species. So they get down there, they fan out to in the area where the life sign was detected. Shaxs immediately finds a huge heap of Mugato dung, which he proceeds to scoop up on a finger and taste. He says it's fresh and tangy, and so they must be on the right trail. And so they start going along that trail. Rutherford and Boimler are hanging back, and they're trying to rationalize this whole Mariner thing. They're like, oh, you know what? It's just Mariner. We're only looking for one Mugato beast. So the bartender tells us she'll only flip out if her back is up against the wall. So we're probably fine. More dung, more Shaxs tasting it. Finally, they discover a huge Mugato, like uh, pens, basically like these Ferengi have are like breeding these Mugato to sell for their horns or tusks. And these are the like I wrote down old school Ferengi because Ferengi, when they first showed up in TNG, had like lightning whips or something and stole women and hopped around
Yes.
weirdly and were like just bad
Season
guys with
like an
big
early one
ears.
of season one. It was
I want to
great, and
say
those
season one,
electric
yeah,
whips that they
yeah, and
had.
you're like, what is this?
Do you remember
It was the
because there
80s.
was there was a scene where the Ferengi was on screen with Picard, and
Yes,
the Ferengi was huge. Like the face just took up the whole screen.
yeah.
I
It
just
was
remember
supposed to
that
be,
and be
we're
like,
like,
oh,
big
yeah,
head, big
big
ears,
ugly head.
lightning whips, and they wanted to steal the women of the Enterprise or something like that. I forget what the exact plot
Probably.
of that episode was. Anyway, these old school Ferengi are down there, and they're selling the Mugato cubs for their horns and tusks. They have laser whips. The leader is wearing a Mugato fur, like a full Mugato fur, head to toe. And they have a signal dampener, so there's no way for them to be able to reach the Cerritos. Boimler suggests, "Hey, maybe we should retreat and contact the Cerritos and get some backup." And Shaxs is like, "No, we're outnumbered. This is just how I like it. Backs up against the wall." And so they attack. They show up. They attack their Ferengi poachers. They confront the leader. Shaxs basically says, "Do you have a permit?" And the Ferengi says, "Yes, a permit to whip you." And he tries to whip Shaxs. Shaxs dodges. The whip hits a control panel. It lets all the Mugato out. There's a stampede. Everything goes absolutely crazy. They start killing all the Ferengi, the Mugato, right? Like many of them anyway. The person who was there is like was buying Mugato horns. Manages to get back to his little ship and take off without getting ripped apart. Boimler and Rutherford look over and see in the madness, Mariner stabs Shaxs with a knife she appears to, and then be sucking the blood out of the wound or something. It's crazy. So they run away because they're terrified and they think Mariner has turned because she's Black Ops, and they're dummies. Um, the buyer, meanwhile, gets out of the planet. Sort of atmosphere is hailed by the Cerritos, denies everything. They're like, "Hey, we just want to know if you ran into our away team." He tries to blow them off. They try to tractor him in. Then his ship starts to come apart, so they emergency transport him to the bridge, and his ship blows up, even though they were at the quote lowest tractor factor. And that
I'm sure
really,
that happened in a TNG episode as well. I just couldn't figure out which one.
it seemed familiar, but also like
Hmm.
I feel like in a TNG episode that would be like a real mystery. It would be like a real question, like why did it blow up? I don't remember it being like what this turns out to be like a just a scam, right?
Wasn't there one where like I feel like it was a scam and it was Ferengi and it like someone or maybe that it was the Patlex and they
That seems more
captured or
likely.
kidnapped somebody and
Although
then
there was a couple,
something
the
blew up
Ferengi
when
did
they
come
tried to
back.
tractor it or something. Do you remember?
Yeah, it's
Ugh.
all a jumble in my brain. I can't remember if it
Yeah.
was the Packlets or the Ferengi. I feel like the Ferengi were always super combative, but so were the Packlet. Weird. I mean, season one and two of
We could
TNG.
yeah.
It's a long ways away. Although I did recently send Stevie. You may recall if you listened last week, Stevie was uh, you were sort of you were non-believing that there were commemorative plates sold
That is correct. Yes.
for franchises of TNG, and I was at my dad's house, and the commemorative plate, which sits on the mantle to this
I'm
day
actually
for
going to post that.
TNG,
I'm glad
I
you
send a
reminded
photo.
me.
Please do. I'm very proud of
Mm.
my dad's collection. There's also a Cisco doll, but I didn't take a picture of that because even I'm embarrassed about it. It's still in the box. So anyway, where were we? Uh, Meanwhile, Boimler and Rutherford, they're like kind of lost on the planet. They're attacked by a wild Mugato. They hide under a tree and they meet Patingi, who says he's a biologist. He has 5 books on Mugatus and he will walk them to safety. And he says, just stay down and follow me. And he starts making Mugato noises. And they're like, you know what? Patingi's great. He's going to save us. He's Australian voiced, even though he's not Australian. Um, Tendi is out looking for people on the ship. She runs into Lieutenant Stevens, who blows her off. She managed to scan him while he's trying to pick up a lady at the bar in 7 forward, and in so doing, exposes him for having weak bones. And then she manages to go do a lot of scans of people. She scans, well, we'll get there. Boimler and Rutherford find out as they're crawling behind Patinki that he's not written 5 books. He has 5 books. He's read 5 books and feels like he knows enough. And they go like, "Oh, that's not great." And then a Mugatu jumps out and bites his head off. So Boimler and Rutherford run away and they fall down a cliff. They survive, and then they return to sort of wandering through the forest, and they wonder if they're going to have to turn in Mariner because she killed Shaxs according to them, and they wonder if she was ever their friend, or just using them as a cover. And then they spot two Mugato, and so they go hide in an empty log, and the Mugato run over and sniff the log, and then start mating on the log, half of which drops into the river, and then they try to sneak out on the other half of the hollow log, but then another one shows up, but that one's just there to watch, so now they're stuck sort of beneath in this log while these Mugato are getting it on. Tendi managed to go. She gets Jet, the new guy who showed up, who was also fighting our friend from the first episode, our Shaka, his arms wide. Chief Lundy on the holodeck on what I assume was a date, like jet skiing. And there's only one name left on her list, patient 08.019. But who is that? Meanwhile, Boimler and Rutherford. Da da da.
Do you want a dun dun dun?
Yeah, I mean, come on. Will we ever find out? Boimler and Rutherford waited out, and when the Mugatos fall asleep after their sweet, sweet mating, they get away, and they wonder if Captain Freeman knew about Mariner all along. And the Boimler's like, maybe it was the captain's idea, and they're like, oh, maybe this mother-daughter thing was a setup the whole time. And then they spot a Mugato trap on their path, and they're like, oh, Mugato trap. And then they're surprised by Mariner, who jumps out of the thing, and she steps into the trap, and she's like, guys, help, the Ferengi are coming. They're like, we're not going to free you because we know you're black ops. And she's like, what? And they're like, we saw you kill Shaxs and suck his blood. And she's like, Shaxs got stabbed by a Mugato, and it was poisonous, so she had to suck the poison out. And she reveals that this whole black ops rumor, she started it. Everyone on the Atlantis, of course she did. She's Mariner. She likes to pop off. Um, she, everyone on the Atlantis got Kerplickian lice. Kerplickian lice. Yeah, practicing Kerplickian lice.
Rice. Oh, I said rice.
Kerplickian, you did say rice. Kerplickian lice.
Kerplickian lice.
Kerplickian
Killer
lice.
Warrior
Killer
Romulan
warrior nuns. Killer Romulan Warrior nuns. Killer Warrior Romulan nuns. Killer Romulan Warrior nuns. It doesn't matter how you say it, just as long as you get it out. Anyway, so to test this whole thing, they throw both their tricorders at her and they hit her in her face. And they're like, it was a lucky catch. And she's like, you dummies. But the Ferengis are on their way and Mariner's still stuck and they can't help her. And she says, like, well, you guys are going to have to be the badasses today and save us all. And the Ferengi show up and take Mariner while Boimler and Rutherford hide. Tendi is still searching for the last patient on the ship. And Tiana's like, you know what? I thought you'd give up after this. You did a great job. No problem. Just move on. And Tendy's like, okay, I guess. But then she sees on a panel that the call sign for the doctor is 08.019. And it's Tiana who's the last holdout. And she's like, I don't need to be scanned. I'm the doctor. And then they chase each other through the ship. And the doctor gets very catty, literally. Yum, 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 yum. Meanwhile, Freeman, Captain Freeman offers the sort of dude who was trying to buy horns. By the way, that has to be Paul F. Tompkins doing that voice. Mr. Hyde, a shuttlecraft to replace his ship, and he starts to milk it. And she's like, "Well, what?" He's like, "I had a lot of precious things on there," and they're like, "What?" And he just looks at the souvenirs behind her on the wall and is like, "Oh, all those things." Basically, he lists off all the stuff on her wall. Boimler and Rutherford get to the Ferengi compound. They sneak in. They're sort of like, what are we going to do? We're not badass martial arts studying guys. They're like, but we have something that we have our brains. So they go in there and they grab some tools and you're like, oh, they're going to A-team this. Meanwhile, Mariner and Shaxs and everyone else on the away team is stuck in one of the pens. Mariner, Tendi, actually is still chasing Dr. Tiana, and they go into Jeffrey's tubes and they're like fighting. Tendi falls out and breaks her arm, and she's like, oh, my arm. And Tiana's like, oh, yeah, good try to get me to try and stop. And then when she turns and looks back, you can see Tendi's arm is visibly snapped open. And so she does come back, but then Tendi manages to scan her when she comes back before passing out from her actual broken arm. Meanwhile, Mariner in her pens is telling the Ferengi they're dumb for not just replicating stuff instead of buying it with their gold pressed latinum. She calls them throwback last outpost Ferengi. And says like, haven't you ever heard of quarks? You guys could be onto something different. Why are you selling animals like poachers, you weirdos? Boimler and Rutherford show up, and they've got their weapon, and it turns out to be basically a hollow PowerPoint presentation showing the Ferengi a cost benefit analysis that they could increase their profits, where they, to instead of selling the Mugato beast, create a sort of preserve for the Mugato and charge people to show up, and t-shirts and shirts and so on and so forth. Um, they confer and they agree to the compromise. Hooray, compromise! Remember diplomacy in the beginning? In the end, Shaxs is back on a bio bed, and Dr. Tiana is standing over him, and she says the Mugato venom can have effects on people, and so she'll need to check up on him later. And then they're maybe gonna get it on. I mean, almost definitely. Tendi's in a bio bed, and she's looking a little despondent. But then a patient next to her goes into alert, and when other people try to take control, again, she jumps in and she says, "No, give me 20 cc's of space," and asserts herself. And Dr. Tiana comes over and congratulates her and says, "You showed a lot of chutzpah today." But then she's like, "But this is not your patient, so get the hell out of my way." Freeman is talking to her husband, Admiral Freeman. I don't know what the Admiral's first name is. Anyone? Anyone? Bueller? Bueller?
I didn't have that. I just had Admiral. Let me find.
I also wrote. I wrote husband
Do you want me to
Admiral.
Google that?
Yes, I would love for you to Google that. You can Google that. I know we don't play that one a lot, but it might be my favorite. You can Google that.
Google that.
You can Google that. I don't think I can sing that
It
low.
is.
Except in the morning.
Oh, we just have Admiral. That is his only name.
Just Admiral Freeman.
Admiral Freeman.
All right.
Played wonderfully by Phil LaMarr. And you were correct. It is Paul F. Tompkins.
Oh, it has to be. Paul F. Tompkins and Jess McKenna. I just listen to them on too many podcasts. When they speak, I hear it. If they were Irish, I wouldn't be able to. Oh, I've been working on my Irish. This is not important for the podcast, but
sure.
I've been working on my Irish.
Irish.
Yeah.
To be sure.
Maybe that's all I got right now. So let's not get too crazy. But I'm just hoping. I know the eyes become always. I've been working on my Irish. No, it's not great, but I'm working on it.
Try with when you say "I will," and if you what's the word? When you
a contraction.
Yeah, contraction. Thank you. I was going to say concentrate. Oil becomes oil as an
oil. Oh, see, when you say it, but then I like to say it's oil.
Yeah, exactly. And if Arnold Schwarzenegger were to have done an Irish accent, he would have said, "Oil be back.
Oil be back. Oil be
back.
I'll oil." I can't do it. Okay, so anyway, I'm working on it for D&D, so now it's gonna happen. And stay tuned, listeners, for my Irish accent. It's gonna be great, and that's not it. So Freeman is talking to her husband, Admiral Husband. He asks if there was any ship accident. She's like, "Oh no, nothing like that." He's like, "Okay, so we heard some stuff in that sector that people show up with a ship that is kind of beat up and it self-destructs, and they blame Starfleet, and then people, Starfleet it's like a scam." And Freeman's like, "Oh no, nothing like that ever happened." But they quickly track to the shuttle before Mr. Hyde can get away, and they pull him back and say, "Listen, you can basically go to a Starfleet penal colony, or you can work for the Ferengi on the Mugato Preserve." So he winds up shoveling Mugato dung on the preserve. Final scene: Boimler, Rutherford, and Mariner are playing diplomat back in 7 forward. And apparently Mariner is beating the hell out of them, but they won't let her know, and she doesn't really get the game, but she's doing great. She goes to get 3 drinks at the bar. It's Honus at the bar again. Did I say his name right? Honus? I need to consult my notes to be honest.
Honus.
Honus.
You're correct.
Honus. Yes. She goes to get 3 drinks, and then while she's there, she starts a rumor about Boimler and Rutherford, about them being the Mugato brothers, that they got bitten or cut by one of the Mugato and received strange powers. And Honus says, "Oh, well, your secret's safe with me," and they gets yelled at by his boss, which apparently is what Honus does. Thus ending episode 4, season 2 of Lower Decks. And like days of old, I shall throw the papers. Stand back. The end.
Chris. Oh, I love it when you throw the papers.
Literally fell on my head.
Please hold while Aki picks up his papers.
I need to consult my papers. I think it's evident if anyone's ever seen me try to throw papers that I've never won any sporting event. I do not know how to celebrate. Okay, well, that's the end of that.
My face hurt.
Should we do well, should we do
It's
Easter
either Easter
eggs?
eggs or quotable moments.
It's either
If you want to do Easter eggs,
let's
then
do Easter eggs.
all right.
Wow! Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Easter Egg Corner. My name is Aki Bernice. We go immediately to our consultant on the ground. Consultant? Our reporter on the ground. Stevie Man. Stevie, what have you got for today's episode?
Well, hi there, Aki. Pleasure to be here, as always.
Yes.
As you know, we have a number of Easter eggs in this episode. However, I did feel that this was much more the quintessential episodic trek
Yes.
of Lower Decks than we've
Uh-huh.
really seen before, especially in this season. So,
Toast my goats.
totes my goats.
Totes my
My
goats.
favorite thing, I think, was this was not an Easter egg. However, my favorite thing was the Diplomath game. It was Diplomath.
Yes.
I thought I was like, oh, that's so nerdy. I really love it.
So nerdy.
So fucking
Diplomats.
nerdy. But obviously we had our Ferengi, who Mariner even referred to as some creepy throwback to last outpost style Ferengi. Which, and I was a bit like, there's this sort of discussion as to whether this is a like reference to the episode title,
Mhm.
or perhaps we're referencing what it was in like the Starfleet logs.
Right.
Hard to say, but it's like super meta if it's going to be like the episode title.
I think that it's actually, if I'm not mistaken, I didn't go back and watch the episode, but I do believe it's actually called The Last Outpost. Not the,
It is.
I know, I know the episode, but I mean in the episode. This is impossible to talk about.
Oh,
It's so
yes,
meta.
you're
I
right.
think in the episode they call it The Last
The last
Outpost.
outpost.
Thus, yeah.
Okay,
But it
that's
skirts
just
the
not
line. No, you're right.
It does, yeah.
You're
Interesting.
right. Mhm.
We also had a reference to Starfleet intelligence in Section 31, where we were talking about Mariner and whether she was Black Ops, that kind
Yes.
of B plot that was going on, which I thought was quite
Ash.
fun because obviously Section 31, I'm excited.
Section 31.
Section 31. Obviously, we had our Anbo or Anbo? Anbo
I think it's
Jitsu.
Anbo, but I'm not sure. Yeah, I think it's Anbo Jitsu.
Jitsu at the beginning for our cold open. And I remember Riker dressing up in that. It was hilarious. It was a bit, I think it was like the same era of like gladiators. Do you remember?
Yes.
Like it was of that time, and the
that
sort of
American
blue and the
Gladiator
red.
nonsense.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, it's hilarious. And then the last one I had, which I think you would love. So the Denobulans are chatting at the beginning about drinking the Klingon Raktagino, which we think is sort of similar to coffee, which is notably a favorite of the stars, I should say, the crew of DS9. So it was Kira, like Captain Kira, well, sorry, Major Kira, Captain Sisko, and Jadzia Dax, but not Ezri Dax.
Ezri Dax did not like Raktagino. Crazy.
Yeah.
She was only there for a season.
But still, I thought you liked the little DS9
I
reference. We don't get
love
so many of
it.
those.
I have a doll Cisco at home, as we've discussed in this episode.
Yes, we need to see the doll.
I don't know about that.
Just at least for the Instagram, Aki.
I don't know about that. Maybe. It seems like a bridge too far. We all know I can't throw paper, so I don't know if we need to also see that I have Star Trek dolls. Also, it may make me want more Star Trek dolls.
We have just posted your Star Trek plate. So
you did?
I did, yeah.
Well, the world can know. Now it can be told.
Time while you talk.
Commemorative Star plate. It might not be the only one.
Do you have any Easter eggs that you would like to reference?
Do I have any Easter eggs that I'd like to reference? There was nothing. You covered the Last Outpost thing, and I couldn't in my just casual memory remember anything about Mugatos or Bugattis, the monster, the beasts.
Bugatti Bayrons.
Yeah.
That's the car.
So I don't know. For me, the Easter eggs now apparently is identifying voice actors from bit parts. Yeah.
You enjoy that.
I sure do. Yes.
Well, Aki, that's all we have time for here on Easter eggs down at Star Trek Lower Decks. It's back to you in the studio.
Thank you for joining us, and now we're going to throw to our next program, Quotable Moments.
Yes, we would. What the fuck is it? It moves.
Yes, we
Any minute now.
might.
Quotable moments.
Whew, that one came out of nowhere.
I mean, I should just do it myself.
Well, but it's got that reverb you put on it is very,
It does. It's just a smidge.
very something. I
It
almost
just
had some
scares you a
received
little bit.
pronunciation today.
I'm sorry?
Briefly. You're telling me about ears last. This. Our podcast is
Yes.
about Star Trek and accents, right?
Yes.
Those are our two things. Anyway, I don't know that I can recreate it. It happened while I was wandering around the house. So, I have a couple of quotes that I very much enjoyed.
Okay.
Two of them are from Dr. Tiana. I really loved when Tendi finds out that she's the last holdout. She says, "You want me to see the doctor? See a doctor? I am the doctor," which I really loved. And the truly almost appalling when she says to Shaxs that she might have to check up on him later because of the after effects of the Mugato venom. She says, "I might have to check up on you later. In your quarters, I just got my physical. I could heal you all night." Wow.
Yeah.
Aye.
Totes in a
Yeah.
probes.
Totes and apropes. I like the docs who are topes and apropes. I like Give Me 20 cc's of space. And
I love that.
This is so hard now that I'm back to my stupid paper. I used to make them bold. Now what do I do? I think that's all I have. You got anything outside of that?
I have one, and it was Rutherford, and they were, down on the planet, and Rutherford says to Boimler, "She doesn't seem dangerous. I think we're just being silly-billies." Well, that was cute.
It is cute, and he was right. But then
Yeah.
they spiraled out of control.
Don't we love a good anxiety spiral?
We
In an
all
episode.
live in a yellow submarine. Yeah, I think that's it.
Yeah.
You want me to see a doctor? I'm the doctor. And I can heal you all night. I'm just flipping through my pages here like a super nerd playing diplomats. Oh, that's all I got. Wait,
right.
no. Oh, no, I said that already. Shaxs says, "Do you have a permit?" And the Ferengi says, "Yes, a permit to whip you." That was my other favorite line.
That was a good one. All right. Let's
next time on Set Phasers. Yeah. So listen, next time on Set Phasers, we'll talk about episode 5. Again, we're watching these live, so I don't know what that means. But we're very excited about it. I hope you're excited. I think this means we're halfway through the season. If this is a 10 episode season, might be less. Might be 8.
You're one away from being halfway through the season.
We're one away.
If
yes, of course.
10.
If it is in fact a 10, and I'll let you know. Oh, cliffhanger for next week. I'll let you know if it's a 10 episode season once I Google that.
We also need to do Strange New Worlds. That's coming soon.
Is it coming out
add that
soon?
to our docket. Yeah.
Oh yeah, Strange New Worlds, Section 31, all of it, baby. Yeah.
We have so much
all of
work
it. How are we gonna? We're gonna have a lot of work. I hope they never put out more than one at a time because that would destroy us.
I think they are. I think that's what's happening.
Really? There's going to be overlaps?
Yeah. I think so.
Why would they do that to us?
I don't know. I will check. I will check the Instagram.
Strongly lettered. I'm going to send a strongly lettered word to Alex Kurtzman and tell him, "Dear Sir Robatum, to whom it may concern, you should not put out more than one."
Oh no, I messed up.
It's
1 week till Star Trek Day. I think that was earlier this week.
Yes.
We're okay. I think it's one. Oh, I feel bad about that because I think it's my wife's birthday on Star Trek Day. Oops.
Oh no, you're gonna have to do one of those sitcom episodes where you're like, yes, of course, a romantic dinner. Let me be right back. I just need to check on the turkey, and then you run over and you watch some Star Trek. I think it's gonna work out fine. You're an adult. You're not gonna do anything ridiculous. Anyway, thank you very much for joining us and listening to us. If you enjoyed the program, you can catch it anywhere you get your podcast from every Monday, wherever you get your podcast from.
Yep. Join us or by following or subscribing. And of course, you can follow along with all of our fun Instagrams. And if you want to see that last post about the commemorative plate, you can find it at Set Phasers and at Set Phasers Podcast on the Facebook and the Instagram.
Yeah, and real talk, that plate is from like 30 years ago, so it's commemorative, baby. We are remembering. I mean, If you'd
And
like to support our...
I hid the location so that no one could find it.
Yeah, it's
and, like,
nowhere.
stalk
It's
you
in
and steal it and put it
it's
on
in the
eBay.
Alpha Quadrant somewhere. If you want to support us on our continuing mission to discover what else Star Trek has in store for us, we'd only be delighted. Also, it may go into more commemorative plates. You can patronize us. We can take it by going to patreon.com/setphasers.
Indeed. Well, until next time, and if you have not signed up for our Patreon, unfortunately, you will have just missed our last Netflix watch party, but you can catch us next month.
Yeah, it'll be
and
yesterday at the time of hearing.
we'll watch Trek together. But until then, I am Stevie Mans.
And I am patient 08.091. And this has been Set Phasers, a highly illogical Star Trek podcast. Ooh.
Computer. End program.